Hey guys, Churchy here. So in this video, I just kind of wanted to share some thoughts I have about Remnant 2, give you guys my review of the game. I've been playing Remnant 2 quite a lot. I've hit about 50 hours now. I'm really enjoying it. I started out as a hunter, and then I was finding that a little bit too slow, and a lot of the combat encounters were kind of centered around kind of medium to close range fights. So I sort of, or at least the ones I was encountering were like that. So then I sort of felt like I needed a bit of a switch up because the hunter was just feeling a bit slow and a bit cumbersome in those situations to start out with. Then I swapped to a gunslinger, and that was great. The gunslinger felt so smooth, the skill rotation and everything felt great. I played my way through the campaign on veteran, and then I finished that up, and then I've just sort of spent some time doing adventures, doing the adventure mode in the game, and just kind of roaming around collecting stuff and unlocking all the other classes and stuff. Did play a tiny little bit of co-op, but I'm hoping that I'll be able to get some mates to play some more co-op soon. Excuse me, and yeah, hopefully maybe stream some co-op at some point. But yeah, let's get into the review. So I do want to share some thoughts, and I'm going to start with the bad, but do bear with it because, yes, the game has some issues, but even with the faults, Remnant 2 is a really great game. It's very solid, and I have a lot of good things to say about it. But yeah, let's start off with the bad, because I did have quite a few little issues here and there with it. So, fairly minor one. I had some collider issues. What was happening was basically there was a couple of times in some fights, particularly the Nightweaver fight, where colliders of certain objects didn't really line up with what was visually represented. Basically, there was a fence with a hole in it, and I couldn't go through the gap because it was just one solid collider, and that got me absolutely slaughtered at one point. And then straight after that, I went to another fence that was all broken up, and I should have just been able to walk over it or through it or whatever, but again, got caught on an invisible wall because the collider was still there. So a couple of things like that, and one or two other minor things like that with the colliders of different objects have been a little bit frustrating. In a boss fight like that, it's particularly frustrating because it's sort of, in games like this where, you know, any mistake can cost you the fight. When something happens that's not your fault and it gets you killed or something, or gets you hurt, it's like extra frustrating, you know? So that's why I sort of bring this up. Okay, so I did have some issues with the puzzles, particularly the ones on Geisha. I feel like they were kind of slowing down and breaking the flow of gameplay. That was mostly just the first time that you come across them. Some of the design choices in those puzzles I felt were kind of bad, especially the music box one. I was getting pretty damn frustrated with that one because I actually had figured out the solution. I had it right in the thing, but little did I know that there was another lever hidden behind a door that I had to go and activate by going through a couple of other areas before I got back to that area, and would then, and I mean like different map spaces, like entirely different maps I had to go through to get back to the other side of that door, to then turn on like a lever that turns on a generator thing that then makes the puzzle actually solvable and work. The problem I have with this is that you walk up to the music box, you put in the thing and you click the lever, and it looks like it actually raises up the thing and does out the spikes on the music box, and then it basically does nothing, and it's like, okay, it's not working, but the machinery is working. The only visual clue that there might be something more is there's a cable running up to like a cog turning looking thing, right? But you don't know, you have no extra information than that really. So it almost looks like the puzzle will mean that when you solve it, maybe it turns on that thing. In reality, what it does is it raises up a bridge, and you need to turn on that thing first, that like cog spinning whatever thing. But there's no visual indicator of this. Like I said, from your perspective, when you arrive at the puzzle, it's easy to confuse it and think, okay, I get the combo right on this music box puzzle, that will turn on whatever this cable's connected to. And then also having no indicator that like the solution's right, but there's more for you to do. It just really, like, this one just really frustrated the hell out of me, because like I spent like half an hour with the right combination in, just not realizing that I actually had to come back around. And it was one of the first puzzles I encountered as well, so I wasn't familiar with that kind of element in the design of their puzzles, where often it is like, go off, find something else, come back. So that got quite frustrating. And I think honestly all they needed was like a simple little voice line, maybe something like, if you get the combination right in the music box, maybe your character says, and it's not working because you haven't turned the generator thing on, maybe your character just says something like, seems right, but it isn't working, I should come back later. Like something like that. Anything like that would have been much appreciated. And I did have a couple of other frustrations with some of the other puzzles, just because, I don't know, I wasn't playing to play puzzles, you know, and the puzzles were just, there's better puzzle games out there. The puzzles were just kind of like, yeah, like I said, there's things that you can like solve, but in reality you have to go off and do something else and come back. There was a little jumping puzzle, which was just a bit of a gimmick because it wasn't really a puzzle. It was more just like platforms descending down to a lower bit at one section. That was a bit annoying because at first I didn't understand how the movement mechanics work, but it's basically just, once you figure out that like, if your character falls lower than like 3 feet, they'll always automatically roll after. Once you understand that, it was easy as anything, and you'll always be able to succeed after that point. But it was just a bit of a gimmick because the jumping and stuff is a bit unreliable at times anyway, so. And speaking of that sort of thing, I did have a couple of minor frustrations with movement. These were very, very minor. It was just things like occasionally you would be trying to like jump off a ledge to avoid enemies or something, but there'd be a ladder nearby and your character would automatically like start climbing down the ladder, and that would get you stomped basically. And yeah, just always rolling after your character jumps like a couple of feet. That was, yeah, that could be a little bit annoying at times. Usually it wasn't a big deal, but yeah. Unfortunately, I also had some performance issues. Nerud was the worst offender with this, especially the Vault of the Formless. I'm pretty sure it has something to do with some of the fogs and like volumetric effects that they've got going on. And I also had some performance issues in the final boss fight on Root Earth, which was a little bit annoying because it's like the big epic finale. And then I had to basically turn down a bunch of settings, which sort of helped, and then I was basically fiddling around with settings to try and get it to fix itself. There was a particular attack combo that it seemed to kind of freak out the most after, which was when the boss does like a sword drag through the ground. They sort of charge it for a second and then they drag it through the ground towards you and like swing up, and then their hand glows red and then they slam the ground again. For whatever reason, that attack combo seemed to really start making some weird frame rates happen. And yeah, so that was sort of the performance issue side of things. In most places it was pretty stable though, so I will give it that. And it's just something they need to work on and fix, I think, because it does detract a little bit from some of those environments, because the environments are gorgeous. So yeah, enemy spawns and some of the frustrations I had with those. Some of the spawning kind of, it's sort of like you'll be in an area, you'll clear it, you'll move forward, you'll start fighting something else, and the game will kind of spawn enemies in behind where you've already cleared. And then also some off-screen ambushing kind of happens. And part of this is just kind of like, I think some of the audio volumes are a bit weird, or something's not quite right there, or it's just getting lost in the mix with the music. I'm not entirely sure what's going on, but there are definitely times where you'll get attacked by something from off screen that didn't really make a sound at all. It's fairly rare, but it does happen. And it is quite annoying when there's occurrences of that, where you're basically moving through a place, you've cleared behind you, you're moving forward, you're fighting stuff in front of you, and then something ambushes you out of nowhere. And you didn't really have any chance to know it was there, sort of. Again, I don't know, maybe it was just, it could be like an audio bug or something, or just an audio level issue, or as I said, it could be things getting lost in the music mix. Maybe I should just turn off all the music, but I didn't want to because the music is actually pretty cool. And then also I had kind of a couple of boss frustrations. Again, it was just, there was a few bosses that just had a little bit of that, like they relied on sort of off-screen stuff to kind of be the thing that's hitting you and hurting you, or potentially going to hit and hurt you. Just stuff that's like hard to visually and audibly track sometimes. And I think some of this stuff, like the ambushing from behind and some of that off-screen sort of stuff that's going on, I feel like maybe balance is something that's kind of affecting that, because in this game you've got guns after all, so like it definitely shifts the way you're engaging with enemies versus a game like, say, Elden Ring. So maybe because you've got guns and you've kind of got that advantage of having guns, they needed a way to actually like bring up the difficulty a bit. I'm not sure, but in that line of thinking, this game definitely feels like it messes with you a bit. What I mean, it's kind of hard to describe what it is I'm getting at exactly, but when I do compare Remnant 2 to something like Elden Ring, for example, there's just a lot more times in Remnant 2 where I felt like the game was sort of messing with me or fucking with me. And I think, again, it's just kind of coming from some of the enemy spawns and some of the off-screen stuff that hits you. And even kind of some of the boss attack patterns. A lot of them have a heavy emphasis on kind of like dodge. And then it's kind of like, there's a few that are just very cheeky with some of their attacks and some of their telegraphs, and like, again, part of that is like you just learn the patterns and you learn the fight, but I don't know, it's hard to define what I'm getting at, but it's just, there's been more times in Remnant 2 where I've felt like I've been injured or killed by something that I had less ability to avoid or control than in other games that I played in this genre. But yeah, so it's just something to note. It's not a huge deal, but it's just something I noticed while I was playing. Another issue, which I've had unfortunately, was co-op bugs. I haven't really played much co-op yet. I just mucked around for a couple of hours with a mate the other day. And even in that short period of time, we had a glitch where he couldn't pick up ammo. So that was a bit of a problem.
I am out of ammo in my primary, but when I go to pick up ammo, it says I'm full. And I can't use items, I can't use consumables at all. So like my ammo box, if I use it, it just spawns a static ammo box right on my character, and it floats there in the world. Doesn't get used.
That's amazing. And then from him, I've just heard about various other bugs from playing co-op, and some of them were kind of game-breaking. I heard about some trait loss stuff where you could basically end up with a negative trait value, and then if you tried to use a renewal thing to fix your to like reset your traits, that would actually bug it out permanently. So yeah, hearing a couple of things like that, it's not very encouraging, and I feel like they've got their work cut out for them to fix all those bugs, because co-op is like a big selling point of this game, and it's something that I really want to dive into. So I'm very, very hopeful that they will fix all that, and I'm sure they will. So that's all the bad sort of stuff that I have to say about it out of the way. And you might think that like I'm really hating on the game or whatever, but I'm just really picking out all of the things that I wanted to critique, because even with all those faults, I still think the game is like really, really good. So let's talk about the good stuff. Something that I really, really like is that they've refined and expanded systems that were in the first game, and they've added some new ones. So melee combat feels smoother. gunplay feels smoother. I think the hitboxes feel better, just generally. Everything kind of in that realm of the moment-to-moment gameplay, it all just feels more fluid. I don't know what tweaks they've done exactly, but yeah, it all just feels really good. Fun, engaging, fluid, responsive, for the most part, apart from the small issues I mentioned earlier, with some of the movement stuff. And yeah, another interesting change, I guess, is that they've nerfed some of the trait systems a bit, compared to the first game, but then they've expanded other stuff to kind of compensate for that. And ultimately, I think your character's actually a bit more powerful in this game, the second one. So they've expanded the relic system. They've got different relics now, and you can get relic fragments that can upgrade different parts or aspects of your character, kind of like you might get one that increases your fire rate or something, or give you more health or armor or stamina or whatever. There was basically just a heap of different ones for all sorts of different stats. They've also added more equipment slots for rings. You can wear 4 rings now. In the original, I believe you could only wear 2. So that's really cool too, because it just means you've got more options for builds. And yeah, that's really, really good to have. And then the new class system, speaking of builds, it's really great. I'm pretty excited to dive into all of the different classes. Basically, you pick your starting class, and they'll have like a prime perk and an archetype perk, and then they'll have little traits that they pick up along the way as you level them up to 10. When you hit level 10, you can actually then take that archetype perk and invest points in it, even when you're not using that class, basically. So it's a cool way to like unlock a class-specific perk for any other class that you want to play. You also get the option to dual class eventually, and that is so much fun. Basically, you run 2 classes. Oh yeah, and also with the classes, you get active skills to use as well. So now you've still got your weapon mods like you'd had in the first game, but now you've actually got like active skills to use as well. And some of them are really, really cool. I was basically ran the whole game with the gunslinger's first skill, which was quick draw, where you pretty much, and because of their prime perk, when you use a skill, the gunslinger, when they use a skill, they reload, all their guns automatically reload, and you've got infinite ammo for a short time. So I could like expend both my weapons magazines of ammo, fire off a quick draw, where basically they grab out their handgun and they just go like bang, 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 and it looks awesome. Or you can hold it down and then just do like one powerful charge shot, but then you've like instantly got your other guns reloaded. And the gunslinger was just so much fun because just got better fire rate and reload speed and like all sorts of cool gun benefits basically. And then when I was able to dual class, I was just loving it, because then I got Hunter, which was what I was originally trying to play as, and that just worked so well because then I had like extra weak spot damage and more range damage, and those two comboed really well together. But yeah, so just having this ability to kind of mix and match 2 different classes, and then, you know, you might level up one archetype, invest in their archetype trait, and then actually be running 2 other classes, or you might even have like, yeah, it's cool seeing the potential to play around and kind of like find exactly what you want to run and what works best for you. And there's quite a few different options. There's actually 11 different classes. 4 of them you start with, which is the medic, challenger, the hunter, and the handler. The handler is the one with the pet dog. And then there's also gunslinger, which I think you can unlock pretty early. I'm not sure because I had that unlocked from the start because I bought like a special edition thing. And then there's other classes you can unlock, which is like the alchemist, invader, engineer, summoner. There's the archon, and there's one more, which I can't remember. I'll have a quick look. Yeah, alchemist, challenger, explorer. That's the other one. Yeah, there's alchemist. The ones you can unlock alchemist, explorer, summoner, engineer, invader, and then archon. Yeah. So there's a ton of different classes basically, and they all have traits and skills and prime perks, and so, and the fact that you get to dual class is just yeah, it's awesome. I absolutely love the class system. On top of that, there's heaps of fun stuff to find, which then just enhances what you can do with different builds and stuff. So there's tons of weapons and armors and items to find and upgrade. And then on top of that, there's like lots of secrets to discover and the classes to unlock, because part of unlocking those extra classes is like finding what you have to do gameplay wise to do it. So one of it might be like defeat a boss or something, or like find a certain secret spot or whatever. So that's really cool. And the locations that you do all of this in, absolutely gorgeous environments and levels. The game really is gorgeous. The visuals of the different worlds, they all feel unique. There's Yeisha with vast forests and ruined temples. Lossum with, it's got like basically two worlds kind of merging as one. There's like the Fey Realm stuff, which is just like grand architecture and stuff. Sort of castles, and then there's the more grounded kind of slightly rundown city landscape that's sort of got that feeling of like it feels like a really old city that's kind of progressed forward into the industrial era, is how I'd describe it. Then you've got Narud, which is just this barren alien landscape, and it's just got all these ancient facilities, and it feels kind of Geiger-esque in places, and I also, some of the designs reminded me of the Matrix movies. And then you've got Root Earth, which really does feel like an apocalyptic hellscape, basically. There's ruined cars and buildings strewn about. A lot of this is encased with just gigantic gnarled roots. They used some color here really effectively. Like there's a lot of gray and then reds. And that really just kind of emphasizes some of the horror and highlights just kind of how destroyed this place is, how much destruction it's seen. And the other thing on top of that is like all of these areas just have a really good sense of scale. Like they feel like big areas, even though the actual game space that you're moving through might not feel super large. The surrounding environment and the way the level is built into the surrounding environment really does give it a good sense of scale, and it does make it all just look extra good, really. Like it really brings it home and makes it look incredible, and plants you like firmly in the world that you're on. They also all feel really fun to explore, like all of the levels and locations and environments and everything. There's a lot of the time you'll find like secret little nooks and crannies. There's a lot of stuff to discover. There's a lot of little like, you might see something and think, oh yeah, I can shoot that, and then you try it and you actually can, and then maybe that lets you access somewhere else, and then you find a little secret down there. And another thing they did in that regard was like, there's a few times where they'll have a secret, but there's actually like a second secret within the secret to find, which is pretty cool. Like some of that is pretty good. And yeah, basically if you do find these little secret places and whatnot, then usually you're given like a pretty good reward, whether it's some nice loot or like an unlock, like a class unlock, or like an armor set or something. There's a lot of cool stuff to find. So another element is the enemies. They are all interesting and really fun to fight. The environments all have the enemies to match. Visually, they all fit the theme of the world they reside in. Their designs are all interesting and unique, very visually pleasing. They're just great designs. The actual fighting, the combat with these enemies, it feels great most of the time. Their movements, their attacks, their different levels of aggression between different enemies. There was actually a lot of variety from mob to mob, encounter to encounter. And there was also just a lot of enemies with certain weak spots, and it was pretty fun trying to figure out like, where's a weak spot and how can I exploit it. A good example I can think of is there's like these big fleshy chunks on Narud, and they've got clusters of armor basically, and you blow off the armor. Then there's explosives underneath it, and you shoot the explosives, and then that blows a chunk out of them. And then they've got like a mushy, fleshy purple center, and then you can shoot that, and then, yeah, get weak spot damage. So there's a few things like that that are really cool. Yeah, I think also some of the boss designs kind of, for the most part, feel the same way. They feel really great. It's just sort of... there's that usual frustration that comes with some of the bosses, like in this sort of game, where, you know, you're kind of bashing your head against the wall trying to figure out the patterns and everything, and then eventually it clicks and you get further and you get further and you get further, and then you succeed and you win, and it feels really good, and you get that just that rush, you know, it feels good. The bosses also feel pretty unique. Visually and gameplay wise, like their mechanics, their movements and attacks, and just any other gimmicks that they have. Even when they are kind of gimmicky, it's still varied and interesting. And most of the bosses do have some kind of weak spot that you can exploit. So again, it's just like amped up design from the base enemies and stuff, and then you just get some really fantastic bosses with really cool mechanics. The story was okay. It is fairly sort of basic, or it's like a fairly light implementation, but there's some times where it's pretty interesting. And there is a lot of just background lore to dive into. You can kind of talk to a bunch of different characters, and you can find books and stuff around the place. And all of that can give you like little tidbits of lore to build up the picture a bit more. The adventure mode, been having a lot of fun with that. It is a really good, solid gameplay loop. I've played through a few adventure modes now, and I've been just loving it, really. There's quite a few extra stories, which is something I really like that they've done. There's in the first game, it felt kind of like you're just kind of running back through the area to try and encounter a different boss and you know, farm a different weapon. That's one thing I forgot to mention about the bosses. Another really cool thing is a lot of them have like a different way you can kill them. They have like an alternate kill, and then that will give you a different crafting material, which you can then turn into a different weapon. But yeah, basically, first game had less little story stuff, and in this one, even though the stories are quite simple, it's just like a nice little bit of flavor, and it makes the adventure mode a little bit more interesting, kind of. It's just really cool in the adventure mode, like fighting through a cool area, fighting a bunch of fun enemies, searching for the loot and the secrets that you can find along the way, and all of that culminating in a boss fight. And then you're just kind of repeating that process a few times, much as you would in the normal campaign gameplay, but it's just, you know, its own local world adventure. And then you basically do that a few times, get to the world boss, have a nice big fight, and then, yeah, all of that just feels great, and it really scratches a certain itch I have sometimes for that kind of type of gameplay. And yeah, I can definitely see myself sitting down from time to time to just kind of run through adventures and find more stuff and explore more. Hey guys, this is Churchy from the future here. Before I finish up the video, I just wanted to quickly mention a couple of things that I forgot to talk about earlier. Starting with sound and music. I think the sound and music, even with the little issues I had here and there, the overall sound design is really, really solid. There's a lot of cool enemy noises, just their movements and attacks, and just, you know, idling noises and stuff. And usually the audio telegraphing of different things is pretty good too. Usually it's, you know, when the audio cue is actually there, you can kind of dodge the stuff that's off the screen. It's just that when, like I mentioned earlier with those issues, sometimes you don't really get enough audio feedback to let you know that something is going to attack you from off the screen. But yeah, when it is all working, all of that's really good. There's some great ambience on the different worlds. Just that helps kind of, again, just anchor you in the world that you're exploring. And then that is kind of built upon by the soundtrack. The soundtrack's really good, in my opinion. It's kind of carried by brasses and synths. And then there's always that familiar sting when an elite enemy spawns in, which is pretty good. Or there's the kind of the brass note when the combat music's sort of picking up and more enemies are coming in. So all of that kind of comes together into a pretty solid sound and music package, which is quite enjoyable.
Stop them! Now you burn!
I did also want to talk about character creation. Now, I don't think it's necessarily bad, but it is quite simple. But it doesn't really affect gameplay too much, so I'm fairly neutral on it. But I do love customizing characters in games. I find that it just helps me, you know, create the characters that I want to create. So like the more options I have, the better. It just sort of, when I've made a character that I wanted to create and it's representing what I wanted to represent in that character, it's just another thing that immerses me in the world of the game. And yeah, I just would have loved to see some more options in Remnant 2's character creation. It would have been great to see just more skin and hair color choices, and just having like all of the choices unlocked on all of the different morphs, face morphs and everything. And it would have been nice to see more face morphs and some more hairstyles available. I think, yeah, it would have been good if you could also customize your character like after you finish creating them. I didn't really see a way to do this. But yeah, even just the ability to like change your hairstyle and hair color, and maybe add some more scars while you're playing, you know, just to represent like you've been through more battles and stuff. Or even just being able to change your appearance entirely to match just like different gear sets you're using and stuff. All of that would have been really, really cool. Yeah, I think, like I said, overall it's okay, but it is quite simple, and it could do with some, you know, more options and stuff, but not a huge deal. I think it is also worth mentioning the UI. It all looks really good, it's all very pretty, and it's all functional, it does all work, but again, this is just another thing that's like, it's good, but I think it could do with some improvements. I would have loved to see some kind of sorting functions and search functions, just to more quickly be able to find the particular ring or weapon or whatever you're looking for, particularly the rings and stuff. It gets to be quite a cluttered screen once you've collected a lot of stuff in the game. It would have also been nice to have loadouts of some kind, just to quickly be able to switch, you know, your archetypes and your traits and your gear setups, because then once you've like figured out a few builds that you really like, just having the ability to just have all of those set up and ready to go at the click of a button would have been really, really good. Just little quality of life stuff like that. But again, not entirely needed. But yeah, just would improve the UI stuff a little bit. So basically, to finish up this video, I would say that while Remnant 2 does have some bugs and performance issues that really do need to be ironed out, and while yes, there were a few times where I found the game a little bit frustrating in some of its design choices, you know, puzzles and stuff, and some of the issues I explained earlier. Overall, I think Remnant 2 is a great sequel. It's expanded and refined the formula from the first game in a bunch of exciting and interesting ways. It's a gorgeous game with stunning environments, interesting enemies, and just a lot of secrets to discover. There's fun ways to build your character, plenty of weapons, armor, and items to find, and extra classes to unlock. So even with all of the faults, I still think that Remnant 2 is an 8 out of 10. That's it for this one. Thanks to the legends supporting me on Patreon. I really do appreciate the support. It means a lot, and I couldn't be doing this sort of thing without you guys. And thank you for watching. Have a good day or night, whichever it may be, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.